Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the screening of Angel Studios' new feature film, Sound of Freedom. Please welcome Roger Severino, Vice President of Domestic Policy at the Heritage Foundation.
Welcome to the Heritage Foundation. I was doing some statutory analysis of the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, CAPTA, and there's a provision that says human trafficking is defined under federal law as child abuse per se. And that's true. This is the modern day slavery that requires a federal response. We have two main goals of this presentation. First, to raise awareness of the issue of sex trafficking, and second, to speak to your heart. And that's what the film is really about. I actually have a personal connection. My brother is one of the producers. I'm good friends, Leo Severino. I'm good friends with the director, Alejandro Monteverde, as well as one of the actors, Eduardo Verástegui. And we will have the actors, producers, as well as Angel Studios to give comments after the film. To help kick it off, we're going to have members of Congress speak to the core policy issues at stake. And we have three, one of which is running late due to a hearing. So we will wait for Congressman Chris Smith at the end. But it is my great pleasure to introduce Congressman Ralph Norman from South Carolina's 5th District. After graduating from Rock Hill High School in 1971, he attended Presbyterian College in Clinton, South Carolina, and graduated in 1975. He has served with a number of organizations in his career dedicated to improving the community, including the York County Home Builders Association, the Children's Detention Home, the Salvation Army, and the Medical University of South Carolina's Board of Visitors. He is a dedicated conservative and a deep friend of the Heritage Foundation. Ralph married Elaine Rice Norman in December 28th, 1974, which is probably your biggest achievement, I would say. He will speak first, followed by Representative Andy Biggs. He was elected to serve the people of Arizona's 5th District in 2016. He sits on the House Judiciary Committee and House Oversight and Reform Committee. He served 2 years as chairman of the House Freedom Caucus and currently serves as co-chair of the Border Security Caucus. He led the effort to pass the Amber Alert in Indian Country Act of 2017, which allowed for and provided grants to fully integrate the Amber Alert system into Native American tribal lands. He's made tremendous efforts to hold the Biden administration accountable for its lack of effort to prevent human trafficking at the border, and has been leading the charge to impeach Secretary Mayorkas. Yes, indeed. And finally, we'll have Representative Chris Smith. He was elected in 1980 and is currently in his 22nd term in the U.S. House of Representatives, serving the 4th Congressional District of New Jersey. He's a chairman and co-founder of the House Human Trafficking Caucus and chairman of the House Pro-Life Caucus. He has offered several bills to address human trafficking, including the Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victims Prevention Act, Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, and in 2016, the International Megan's Law to prevent child exploitation. He has been working hard to make sure that pedophiles are held accountable and they're not allowed into our country, unbeknownst to our law enforcement officials. So we will begin with Congressman Norman.
Thank you so much, Roger. It's such an honor to be here with you today. I'm anxious to see this film. I wish all of you could have been at our breakfast this morning. Jim Caviezel, he's in The Passion of the Christ and a great actor. To see him talk about this, and you know, child abuse in his eyes is why he's so excited about getting this out now and let America know of what's going on to our children. You protect your children. And I was telling Abby, he was very emotional this morning. He, teared up, as well as pretty much all of them, the two brothers that put this on. So thank you for being here. It's given us new impetus to get this out. When it comes out, to even put it in take ownership in our own district, to shed light on a horror story for children. I've been at the border. I've seen what's going on with these children. I've seen the rape trees. And the only way to combat darkness is sunlight. And that's what this film does, and that's what we will do as we get this message out. Thank each and every one of you for coming, and I look forward to seeing the show. And it's an honor to serve with Andy and Chris. They're true patriots. And Andy, I guess you're up next.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you and to be with Chris and Ralph and just talk about some policy prescriptions that probably we could get going on. The first thing is, and I've taken Ralph down to the border, doggone it, is I'm from Arizona. You can't believe it. You couldn't believe it. Well, what you got to do is you've got to stop the incentives. You know that there's over 160 people from 160 countries came across our border last year. In the last year of Trump, fewer than 9,000 people were encountered in the Yuma sector. Under the Biden open border policy that Secretary Mayorkas implemented, over 350,000 people in that little sector. And when we start talking about unaccompanied children, the Office of Refugee and Resettlement Director initially told us they'd lost track of 42,000 people just a few months ago. And then they admitted in the hearing that we had about a month and a half ago that the number was in excess of 85,000. These are children. We don't know where they are and who they're with. So, first thing you have to do is you have to secure your border. You must take away the incentives to come here illegally. You must vet whoever you're placing these unaccompanied children with. They quit doing DNA testing under this administration. They will only do any kind of biometrics if you're over the age 14. That is asinine, because the biggest victims of an open border are the children who are being trafficked. So we did H.R. 2 recently. I'm pleased to say that most of those bills, one time or another, were my bill. And we have additional bills that we will continue to introduce to try to stop this human trafficking flow. And just one other thing, because I know you all want to see the movie. You got your Kleenex? You're going to need Kleenex, I guarantee you. The logistical arm is our government. We are the ones that are transporting these children. In just a few years, we've gone from a coyote bringing a kid over, and they would have to take them to a certain destination. That was part of the fee. But now, all the coyote has to do is get them to U.S. soil. And that's why you see children 2 and 3 and 4. I've seen kids that age accompanied by a 10-year-old. We cannot proclaim ourselves to be either a Christian or a religious nation, whatever your denomination is, whatever your faith is, nor a civilized country if this continues. I told my colleagues this morning, some of them, stop nibbling around the edges. It's time to go to the core. This country's going off the edge. We are no longer a nation state. We've lost control of our border. Our border's being controlled by a criminal terrorist organization who has no concern about life. You're here. I know that you care. And so we'll keep fighting. And you keep spreading the word, and let's get this message out through this movie. It will touch people's lives. And so God bless you for being here, and God bless these guys. Thank you.
That was very powerful, Heidi. And thank you, Ralph, for your leadership on this extremely important issue. And Roger, thank you to Heritage for the great work you guys have been doing for decades on combating human trafficking. You know, more than 20 years ago, the U.S. Congress approved and the President signed historic legislation that I authored, known as the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, a comprehensive whole-of-government initiative to combat sex and labor trafficking in the United States and around the world. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act created a bold new domestic and international anti-human trafficking strategy and established numerous new programs to protect victims, prosecute traffickers to the extent possible to prevent it all in the first place, the 3 Ps. Though it's hard to believe now, my legislation was met with a wall of skepticism and opposition, dismissed by many, as a solution in search of a problem. For most people at the time, including many lawmakers, the terms trafficking applied almost exclusively to drugs and weapons, not to human beings. Reports of vulnerable persons, especially women and children, being reduced to commodities for sale were often met with surprise, incredulity, or indifference. Top officials in the Clinton administration testified on the record at my hearings against major provisions of the bill, including naming and sanctioning countries with egregiously poor records on human trafficking, including and especially government complicity. They said that would be counterproductive. Their words. No tip office, no tip report. Any of you have read the tip report? It's about this thick. It's a narrative on every country in the world and how well or poorly they're doing with the 3 Ps, prevention, prosecution, and protection. We did overcome the naysayers as we persist. As a matter of fact, when my bill was stalled and presumed dead, I invited 2 victims of sex trafficking that my wife, Marie, who was in the back, and my best friend, 46 years of marriage, we met with a half a dozen women in St. Petersburg, Russia. A group called Miramed had rescued them. And we met for hours, almost a day, listening to their heartbreaking stories through their tears. And they told us what it was like to be raped every day, to be sexually abused, get your face cracked, your nose broken, if you didn't do what the perpetrators of these crimes wanted you to do. They were so candid. They were so powerful. I invited them to Washington when our bill was stalled. And I do believe they were pivotal in turning people around to say, we've got to do something on this. We got to do it now. It's happening all over the world, including in the United States. And here are 2 victims who came and told their stories. It still took a little while to get that bill passed. We finally got it passed on October 28th of the year 2000. Within a year of enactment of the legislation, no one was arguing anymore that the TVPA integrated strategy of prevention, protection, and prosecution was flawed or unworkable or unnecessary or counterproductive. We also did a number of things, and I've written 5 laws total. We have 1 pending right now that we're naming after Frederick Douglass with a whole new slew of important initiatives, which I think will make a huge difference. And I think you would all agree. We named it after Frederick Douglass, the great emancipator, a man who himself was a slave. We're working with his great-great-grandson, who has helped us on the prevention side especially, to say, prevent it in the first place. And we have legislation that already is enacted, which I also named after Frederick Douglass, to train our young people, to make them situationally aware, so that when a trafficker through drugs or some other inducement tries to get them to go that way, they'll be empowered to know what to do and also to train the teachers and others in the school system. On May 14, 2015, Tim Ballard, the man who is at the core of this tremendous story, testified at my Human Rights Committee. He told us how he had served for 12 years as a special agent for the Department of Homeland Security, part of the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force and the Tech Tourism Jump Team, and he worked as an undercover operative infiltrating organizations at home and abroad that were abusing and trafficking children. Tim told us, however, that he often felt, and these are his words from the testimony, helpless by the fact that the vast majority of child victims that we would find fell outside the purview of the United States. Unless I could tie a U.S. traveler to the case, I would not be able to rescue the children, close quote. He says, that's when I decided, Tim, to create Operation Underground Railroad, an extraordinarily effective organization that has been involved in over 4,000 operations, impacted over 7,000 lives, and has been involved in over 6,500 arrests. He also took a time out. I had been trying for 8 years to get the International Megan's Law passed. Little Megan Kanka, a 7-year-old who lived in my hometown. Marie and I lived in Hamilton until we were gerrymandered out of it in the last election cycle. And this wonderful little 7-year-old was brutally killed by a convicted pedophile who lived across the street, and it led to Megan's laws throughout the country. Well, we found that a lot of these men, and they're almost 99.9% men, get passports, they travel, and they abuse children on these sex tourism trips. And what we did, and it took 8 years to get it passed. The Obama administration was against it, but he finally signed it in the 8th year, passed the House 3 times. They had holds on it in the Senate every time we passed it. It notifies countries of destination that so-and-so who is a convicted pedophile is coming to your country. We can't stop them from traveling, but we can inform other countries so they can put the stop sign out and say you're not coming in. Over 20,000 notifications have been made, and many of these countries, especially in Thailand and elsewhere, are saying one big no to these people coming into their country. I mention that because Tim, in his testimony, went out of his way and he helped us lobbying, particularly the Senate, because that's where the barriers were, and the Obama administration, to get it passed. So I'm ever grateful for that. Working with the Colombians, and I'll finish on this, Tim told us how he had pulled off one of the largest rescue operations ever. More than 120 victims, children as young as 11, in just one day. Tim's heroic life-saving work rescuing children from the extreme cruelty of child trafficking, almost always at great risk to himself and to his colleagues. I mean, this is dangerous work, is the stuff of legends. With a world-class cast, including Jim Caviezel playing Tim, Mira Sorvino as Tim's wife, Catherine. I note parenthetically, she testified before us on 2 hearings as well. She played an ICE agent in an anti-trafficking movie. Didn't get much play, but it was a great movie. And she got so into it, she became the Goodwill Ambassador for the United Nations on trafficking. And what a wonderful bit of testimony she provided to us. And now she's playing Catherine in this. And of course, Eduardo, who just is a tremendous actor and a leader, and he's in this as well. And of course, Alejandro Monteverde, who directed Bella and Little Boy. Marie and I love those movies, and thank you for that. Well, The Sound of Freedom, I believe, and I think you believe it as well, will expose the horror of child trafficking to large numbers of people. We have a hearing. Who sees the hearing? Nobody. Maybe a few people that tune into C-SPAN, but that's about it. Large number of people will now realize what an atrocity human trafficking is. Sound of Freedom will not only inform and educate, it will motivate greater efforts here and around the world to eradicate this pernicious form of exploitation. So thank you for doing this film. Thank you for Heritage for hosting this.
To introduce the film is one of the producers and one of the actors, Eduardo Verástegui, who for some reason or another is called the Brad Pitt of Mexico. I don't know why. Maybe you could help me out. I think you'll see in a moment. But in any event, Eduardo, good to see you again. Please take the floor to introduce Sound of Freedom.
Thank you. It's an honor for me to be here. This is 8 years of our lives working in this film with Alejandro Monteverde, my business partner, the writer and director of this film, with Tim Ballard, with Jim Caviezel, and hundreds of people who, because of them, this is a reality. 8 years of work for 2 hours of your time. And I hope this film will touch your heart and millions of hearts this 4th of July when this movie is coming out, finally, after 8 years. I met Tim Ballard 8 years ago in Los Angeles, California. I met him with his friends. And when I learned what they were doing, traveling around the world undercover, rescuing children who were kidnapped for sexual exploitation, when he explained to us with details what these children are going through, it broke my heart. I couldn't sleep. I was in shock. Yes, in one hand, I was inspired by meeting a true American hero, but in the other hand, it was sad. It was terrible. And he told me, Eduardo, yes, it's very sad. Alejandro, yes, it's very sad. But you know what, man? It's more sad now that you know it if you do nothing. What are you going to do? Well, we are filmmakers. We have a weapon of mass instruction and inspiration, movies. Movies move people. Movies can start a movement. I asked Tim Ballard, this is a global problem, right? Yes, it's a global problem, especially US and Mexico. US is the #1 consumer of child sex in the world. Mexico is the #1 provider. I am not the solution, Eduardo. What do you mean you're not the solution, brother? You're the American hero now. I can be the solution for 1 child, for 2, for 3, for 1,000. Thank God we have rescued thousands of children. We're talking about millions of children. This is beyond us. This is too big. Well, why, if the United States of America is the most powerful country in the world, why, if you have the money, the technology, the intelligence, the army, the police, why we don't finish this problem? Because it's not a priority. Because it's not a priority. How can we turn this into priority? I said, and he said, we need a movement. And that's when I realized that I had to put pause in everything that I was doing in my life so I can focus on one thing with Alejandro, with Leo Severino, Roger's brother, and many others to make this movie so we can start this movement. 8 years of work, every studio passed in Hollywood. We finished this movie three years ago. Netflix is not for us. Amazon is not for us. And the rest is not for us. What do you mean this is not for us? It's not good business. We're talking about saving children. What if this is your daughter? What if this is my son? I will stop everything that I'm doing, and I will hope the whole world will stop everything they're doing so they can help me to find my child. This is not a business. This is a mission. God's children are not for sale. Thank God for Angel Studios. Thank God for Angel Studios because they saw it. And they rescued this film. And I'm very grateful to them. Because of them, now we just received a great news that we are in more than 2,000 theaters around the country, and their goal is 3,600. And it's going to happen. But you know what? We're competing with Disney. Disney is the big Goliath. Disney is corrupting your children. Sound of Freedom is saving children. So it's Goliath and David. If we all become David, as one David, we know the end of the story. We know the end of the story. So thank you so much for being here. At the end, I think we're going to have a panel and we're going to answer questions. God bless you. Open your heart. This is a true story of an American hero. And I hope that when you finish this movie, you will ask yourself the same question Alejandro and I ask. What can we do? What can we do? Ask God, what can I do with the talents that you gave me so I can end this terrible reality and bring freedom back to the children? And if you ask that question and you say these very dangerous words,
there have been many cases where I didn't do what I did in what you saw in the film, where I did come home. I was like, how many times am I going to come home? And this time I didn't. Looking back, it's crazy to me. I had 6 children at the time, and we now have 9 children. That's a whole nother story. There's a documentary about that. Believe it or not, it's called Operation Two Saint. You can watch it on Amazon Prime. But at 6 kids, I was scared to death, and you know, the one thing I'll say before I pass it on is the one thing they kind of missed in the film, because they were trying to protect my reputation a little bit, is I didn't go so easy. I didn't volunteer so easy. I called my wife, and you saw, Mira Sorvino plays my wife, Catherine, and she said, you go quit your job and rescue those kids. That was a very simplified version of what happened. I told her about the situation. I told her that if I stayed, I think we could, but I'm coming home. And I fully expected her to say, damn right you're coming home, because I got 6 kids and we got to feed them, and you could die because you lost your top cover. She didn't say that. She had a personal witness, a heavenly witness, and through tears biting her own lip, she didn't want to say it. She said, you have to stay. You have to do this. And I said, no, I'm not. I can't. And I was in tears. I was freaking out. I was not calm like Caviezel made me look. And and I'll just say this. She ended the debate with this. And I shut up after that. And understand, she says these words to me. It didn't make it into the film, again, because they're trying to make me look braver than I was, which, thank you for. But the truth is important. And understand, she's saying these words knowing that, 1, we just lost our income. And 2, 50-50 chance I'm coming home. So she's volunteering. In that moment, she's volunteering to be a widow because she knows children are out there. And these are the words that ended the debate. I'll never forget them. This is not paraphrasing. This is verbatim. She said, I will not let you jeopardize my salvation by not doing this. Follow that.
Well, I'll take it. I won't follow it. I will complement it. I will not compromise my salvation. And to me, as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, I understood from the beginning of my career that there was 2 kinds of films in my life: the ones that I want to make and then the ones that I'm called to make. And this movement is a calling. And around 7 years ago, I saw for the first time a piece on this problem, on this horror. 8 years ago, on this horror, which is child trafficking. And it's just not child trafficking. It's child trafficking for the sex trade. And that hit me so hard. It shook my soul so hard that it got me to understand that the problem was not only the problem of child trafficking, but it's people knowing that this is happening and they're doing nothing about it. And I did not want to be part of that. And as a storyteller, I started writing a fiction story on child trafficking. And I was going at it. And it requires crazy people to go on this subject matter, because this subject matter is going into the darkness. It's going into the heart of darkness, into the heart of darkness. Forgive my British English. So I dove in, and I called another crazy man to tell him I was about to do this, because most people I was telling them, they were telling me, do not do this. And I needed to find one person to say, yes, do this. And I call my compadre, which means he's the godfather of my daughter, she's right here. And I call him and I say, hey, how much do you know about child trafficking? And we started talking about it. And I say, I feel called to do this. What do you think? He says, do it. So I started writing this fiction story. And around a couple of months into it, he calls me. He says, have you started writing the script? And I say, no. He says, don't do it. Don't start. I say, why? He says, do you know who Tim Ballard is? I say, no. Google him and call me back. So I Google him, I call him back, and I say, man, can you introduce me to this guy? Like, my fiction is just like, it looks like Disneyland in comparison to the real hero has no cape, but is really doing this at the highest level possible. So long story short, I owe meeting this hero to Eduardo, and I want to now see if he can top these two. I passed. So I am just very grateful because it requires somebody like Eduardo to really stand for this, to support, to create this army. So thank you, compadre, for helping us to tell this story.
We're in this together. Well, it's easy for me to say yes to something when you meet a real hero in real life, because meeting Tim Ballard and his friends definitely inspired me to do something bigger than myself. In one hand, I was inspired. In the other hand, I was broken. I was very sad. I was depressed. I couldn't sleep for many days after I learned what these guys were doing. When they explained to me with details what happened to these children, what they're going through, the pain, you cannot look the other way around. For me, even if I try to, impossible, because I feel the hand of God, like putting my head back to the issue, almost like I revealed this to you for a reason. Don't look the other way around. Because when Alejandro told me I'm writing this fiction movie and about this and about that, is this going to change the world? Yes, do it. But I didn't know about human trafficking. I mean, I knew about human trafficking, like general speaking, but not what happened to these children until I met this guy. And I remember like yesterday when he looked at me and he said, yes, it's very sad what I'm telling you, Eduardo. It's very sad, but it's more sad now. It's more sad now that you know it if you do nothing. Okay, as I mentioned before, I'm a filmmaker. We are filmmakers. We have a weapon of mass instruction and inspiration, right? Okay, but first, let me ask you a question. If this is a global problem, and US is the #1 consumer of child sex, and Mexico the #1 provider, as you mentioned to me, how come then we don't finish this problem? If this country is the most powerful country in the world, as I mentioned before, you have the money, you have the intelligence, you have the army, you have the police, you have everything. And he answered, because it's not a priority. I cannot be the solution. No, you are the solution. No, I can be the solution for one child. Of course, you save one child, you save the world, right? What if this is your child? It means the world. Yes, I can be the solution for 2, for 3, for 1,000, for 4,000. But we're talking about millions of children that are being raped 10 to 15 times a day for many years. And after that, the second business, organs traffic. They open them and they sell their organs. We cannot be the solution to end this global problem unless we start a movement. How can we start a movement? Well, I think a film can be powerful because film raises awareness. Movies move people, movie to movement. Movies influence how people think, for good or for bad. So, if we make a movie, we can start a movement that it will be the tool that we need to raise awareness so millions of people can know about this problem, so there is no excuse anymore. Oh, I didn't know, now you know. Now you know. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And for me, what motivates me the most is just to close my eyes for a second and to say, what if this is my son and he's missing right now? What would I do? What would I do? Oh my gosh, this is like una película de terror. It's a terrible nightmare. What would I do? I will stop everything that I'm doing, of course, and I will hope that the entire world will stop everything they're doing so they can help me to find my child. Well, follow this universal principle. Your children are my children, and I will die for them. So let's do this together. And I made a decision. I made a promise. He made a decision. He made a promise. Inspired by his decisions, to dedicate our entire life, not just one movie, our life to end child trafficking. And the movie was going to be just the beginning. So for these crazy guys to start this movement, you need more crazy people, right? So I asked this guy, I didn't want to tell him this, but the script is ready. This is 3.5 years later. Alejandro just finished what I believe is a masterpiece. It's very difficult to write a movie about this. Very difficult, because the children, they never knew what this movie was about, to protect their innocence and their purity. Their parents were there all the time. Very difficult to tell a movie about this in a form of poetry. So many actors passed. They didn't want to do this movie. And I don't want to tell him that. But we knew. There's a lot of actors who didn't want to make this movie. We make offers. Actually, we made an offer with a lot of money, thinking that maybe it's the money. No, it was not the money. That was not the issue. They didn't want to be involved in this. So finally, we went to Tim and we said, Tim, who do you want to play you? And he said, Jesus Christ. I said, hermano, we cannot afford that. That's too expensive. No. What I mean is the guy who plays Jesus Christ in the Passion of Christ. Oh, okay. I think we can handle that. So, do you know him? Yes. And Alejandro and I were like having coffee in Los Angeles, and let me send a text message, see if he responds. I haven't talked to him for a while, but I knew in my heart maybe he's gonna say, talk to my agent, to talk to my manager. Typical answer from a Hollywood actor, And then nothing happened. He answered, right? 2 minutes later, I can meet you guys like in 3 hours. Sure. So we drove, we met with him, pitched the story to him. He started crying. He said, guys, this is too personal to me. This is, God is calling me to do this. I've been thinking about this topic and this issue, and you have no idea. Please send me the script like now. So we did. He read the script. He calls me. He tells me, okay, that's it. But I spoke to my wife, and she saw Narcos Colombia on Netflix. And she's afraid that me going to Colombia to film this movie. So can we film this somewhere else? Well, 1 second, I'll call you back. Team, I have a good news and a bad news. Good news, Jim Caviezel said, yes, he's in. He's going to play you, brother. So, but his wife saw Narcos Colombia on Netflix, and she's not comfortable him going to Colombia to film this movie. Can we do something about it? And he's thinking like, okay, tell him that if 30 ex-Navy SEALs will be enough to protect him. I passed the message, solved, we're in Colombia filming. Remember I said bad news, good news and bad news? Look what happened. Half of them were not on set, these ex-Navy SEALs. No, I'm the producer, I know he's directing, he's focusing on every scene, right? So I know who is on set. Half of them are not on set. I don't want to say anything. Month and a half later, every day those guys were not on set. It's weird. Someone sent me a local article from this Colombian newspaper, where it says that the government arrested traffickers and rescued more than 200 children in Cartagena, Colombia, who were kidnapped for sexual exploitation. And I'm like, I run to see him. Look, brother, like in the movie. And he smiled and he said, that was us. What? That was us. We just gave them the credit because we still to be here underground because of the movie. But we did this undercover operation. And I'm thinking, wow, thank God for Jim Caviezel's wife that says no in the beginning, because that no led me to ask him, and that no led him to think about these guys who eventually, we as a filmmakers, we always thinking when the film is ready, when the films come out in theaters, hopefully this film will raise awareness and save one child. The film was not even finished, and 200 children were rescued. Thanks be to God.
All right, hey, Jim, oh, top that. Good luck, my friend. Deal or no deal?
He always kills it.
I'll deal. When they Alejandro and Eduardo got a hold of me, this script just come down to one line, and that's when God tells you what to do, you don't hesitate. And he came to me when I was a young man, and I really cried out. It was in a really bad way, and I asked God what my purpose was in this life. And one day he just came to me in a movie theater, and presence came over me, and I felt like I was his only child. And I never knew how much he loved me until that moment. And then I felt a peace, and then he said, I'd like you to be an actor. Now, I can either, and I tell people this, I don't believe in myself. I believe in God. And if he believes in me, then I believe that I can do anything. And so that's how I get things done. So if he gives me a task, then I do it. Cut to Passion of the Christ. At the end of that movie, he brings me one of the greatest miracles ever. A little boy, and my wife and I tried for many years to have children. It didn't happen. And he brings us this little boy with a brain tumor. And I looked at the picture of this little boy, and I felt it, I heard it in my heart. And he says, God says, will you love me? And the little boy, and I said, yes. And so he had a brain tumor, and it was scary. Didn't know if he would survive. His surgery was done by the man who separated the first ever Siamese twins joined to the skull. So Bo's surgery was from 7 in the morning till 10:30 at night. 2 anesthesiologists, and at one point the doctor stops and takes a nap, and he comes back and he finishes it. And I went into the room and I looked at my little boy, and he had a swollen head, and I didn't know if he was going to survive. And I was just telling him how beautiful he was. Then next thing happened, 2 years later, another little girl, she had a brain tumor. Nobody wanted her. But my wife always says whether a child is wanted or not doesn't make him any less a human being. So we adopted her, went through the same thing, didn't know she'd make it. Then the third one was a cancer, very, very, very bad cancer, non-rhabdomyosarcoma for any doctors out there. Very little chance this little guy is going to survive. He's a 1-year-old. Once they found out that it wasn't regular tumor, that it was a deadly tumor, they said, well, we'll just, bring him back. And I said, what do you mean? You'll just take him back? Yeah, we'll just take him in the orphanage and he'll die there. And I said, what the hell? Let's do this. And she's agreed, and we went through this. So again, go back to the screenplay. When God tells you what to do, you don't hesitate. That led then to meeting Tim, and then knowing Eduardo in a much deeper way, and Alejandro. And literally, it was like 4 brothers coming together, and it was scary. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I had a lot of experience from the Passion of the Christ, and we were humiliated. We were taken through the ringer in the media. This was before Trump came out and said it was, the lying media and the fake news. And they were fake news back when we were doing that, but we had to fight for everything we had. And so we got that film done. So I had a little bit experience of what this can be like, but when God tells you what to do, you don't hesitate. So what led to that scene when they asked me, when Bill Camp asked me, when God tells you what to do, you don't hesitate. And all I could think about was my children. And of course, my eyes started to water because I just remember the miracle that happened, that God loved me. It's that much, and I would die for that love. And I thought about David. His own father didn't love him, David. And then he went down and fought Goliath. And, he didn't know if he was going to hit that beast. He didn't know, but he just couldn't allow his father to be talked like that. And so I look at us right now as Americans. Can you love God's children more than you're afraid of evil? Can we love Jesus more than we fear the cross? At some point, we're all going to die someday. And when our loving Father, when we haven't loved him enough, it's important to hear how much he loves us, but we at some point have got to love him, or at least love his children. And I see soldiers come by. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Thank you. But will we ever exchange our lives? Will we ever do what they're doing? Or are we like Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake? Now, we have a republic right now, and there's a chance we could lose it right now. We don't have a south border anymore. Our children right now are being just absolutely screwed over left and right, and we've got LGBTQ++, grooming our children, making abortion laws where you can now kill a baby in California 27 days after it's born. Insanity, and making pedophilia easier. And I'm looking at the Christians. If Christians would just unite, what we could do. But it can't happen if we don't have Christians that will answer that question from God. Will you do something? When God tells you what to do, you can't hesitate. That's what faith is. Believing without seeing. He teaches that all through Scripture. In 1 James, faith without works is dead. I know people talk about being saved. Well, I don't consider myself that way, and I'll tell you why. St. Paul talks about it. Contemplate your soul. What is it? In fear and trembling? What is the words? Fear and trembling. Work out your... Well, does that sound like a saved guy? But does that sound like a saved guy? He's not safe. And he also says, the other part, he says, finish the race. So we finished this movie, and we needed some serious heroes. At this point, Alejandro did everything he could to put the film together. Now we got to put it on his back, and he's got to sell this thing, and no one will buy it. And it took everything we had. But again, when God tells you what to do, you don't hesitate. And this country was built on that, man. It was built on it. What I'm asking you to do right now, as Americans, we have to be the new warriors. We have to be the soldiers to lay down our lives for our children. What good mother or good father doesn't equip himself to protect his own children? So I'll go anywhere. I'll do anything to protect them. And the whole time, this whole movie came together for one purpose. My wife, my children, these guys. Look at Alejandro's daughter in the back, his children, our children. We have to defend and fight for our children. And he's equipped us with, everybody in this room right now has the mechanism to step up and to not be afraid. Jesus talks about it, God, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, 365 times, one time every day in the Bible. Do not be afraid. Are we going to take God at his word? Faith without works is dead. Now, I think I'm done, and I think I have to go, but I guess you got to top me. Listen, I love you. I love my country. We are a republic. We have inalienable rights. That's why we're a republic. That's why we're not a democracy. The media keeps putting democracy, right? If you lived in Nazi Germany, you would live in, right before they took over, they were a democracy. And at some point they said, kill 47 Down syndrome chromosomes. And it's merciful, it's beautiful, great. They did. Can't do that here because we have inalienable rights. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And a lot of people don't know. That came from Thomas Jefferson, but there's no coincidence why it came in that order. Thomas Jefferson got it. Some people may know that came from John Locke. It's something like life, liberty, and the right to own property or whatever. But then John Locke, what a lot of people don't know is it came from a man named Father Suarez, from Central America who saw slavery everywhere. And he says, what good if you don't have your life, you have no liberty. If you don't have your life, you have no happiness. That all men are created equal, not born equal. But now they're even killing the born. Reagan said this a long time ago, and I've been quoted many times. I say it, that evil is powerless if the good are unafraid. We're in that moment right now, and we got to come through. We got to come through. And it's films like this that are so countercultural to what Disney is, what the studios are, what they used to be. They're no longer that anymore. This is not Charlton Heston time where they used to make Ben-Hur. That's gone. But there's something else coming out of the fire, and that's Angel.
Thank you.
Everybody thank Jim Caviezel, please. Step out early. Thank you, Jim. And now, Neil Harmon from Angel Studios.
This isn't my first time to Heritage. Thank you. Thank you. Matthew Faraci brought me here years ago when our company was facing an existential threat from a major lawsuit from Disney and Fox. And what I didn't know while this was happening is that Fox originally had the rights to Sound of Freedom and helped Eduardo and Alejandro with this film. And then Disney acquired Fox, and Disney said, we can't release this film. And they were good to Eduardo and worked with him to get the rights back. In a parallel world, we don't know of a startup company that has survived a lawsuit from Disney. And we were building something to allow us to skip over things in movies that we didn't want our children to see or hear. And we came here to Capitol Hill because we wanted to explain how we were trying to solve this problem for families, to where families could get the best stories, but they didn't have to take everything. And Disney had powerful lobbyists. We were out lobbied. We were out gunned with lawyers, and we were in the Ninth Circuit. And in 2020, after Disney started losing $25 to $50 million a day. And after we had been in bankruptcy, trying to protect ourselves in our own home court in Utah, we started Dry Bar Comedy, which now has almost 5 billion views. And then we started The Chosen with Dallas Jenkins, which now has has over 500 million views. And we started growing. And the trustee in the bankruptcy, who was in charge of our company, told the bankruptcy judge, these guys can pay off the whole judgment, and they want to appeal. And Disney said, no, we just want them to stop skipping. We want them to stop filtering our stuff with their technology, and we'll forgive the $62 million judgment. And you got to pay some legal fees, and we'll stop. And we went to our investors, who we had promised that we would take the legal battle all the way to the Supreme Court, and asked them, you guys really love what we've built, where we can skip over things. We can skip over the bad in culture. But we've started something where we're trying to find and amplify the very best in culture. We could take this path all the way to the Supreme Court, and maybe we win. But do we really win? Or do we just stick a Band-Aid on a problem? Or we could take this path where we have an opportunity to produce and distribute shows that amplify light. Stories that are true, just, authentic, admirable, excellent. Philippians 4:8, that's our North Star. And our investors, 86% of them voted to go after telling the stories ourselves. And then we were able to settle with Disney in late 2020, and then by a series of miracles, we not only moved from a streaming company with Dry Bar and The Chosen, but we started to learn about theatrical distribution. And our very first theatrical project was called, that we took directly to theaters, was called His Only Son, and we launched it in Easter of this year. And as we were going to launch this film, Tim Ballard called me and said, I think the rights are going to be available for Sound of Freedom. And
wait, I was on the set of The Chosen. I didn't call you. It was a better story than that.
Right. I was trying to.
It's just too good not to tell. And
yeah. So okay. Well, do you guys want the long or the condensed version? I'm trying to give you the condensed version. In October of last year, Eduardo and I met at the World Congress of Families in Mexico City. We got to know each other. We became friends, and then Tim and I had been friends since long ago. But we hadn't talked to each other in years. And I went to the set of The Chosen in Utah one day during the filming of season 2 or 3. I can't remember which season it was, but I think it was 3. And I only went for 2 hours. And in those 2 hours, Tim showed up. Had never been to the set. And he had received an invite from Jonathan Rumi to come to set. And I went and we connected. And he said, I think the rights might become available. And then he said, let's connect. And we exchanged information. And then he called later on and said, I think we got our chance. He introduced us to Eduardo again. And I'm like, Eduardo, I know you. We met already. And then Tim brought Jim Caviezel. We met on a Thursday, and by the following Tuesday morning, we signed an agreement and shipped the DCPs 30 seconds later to all the theaters for Sound of Freedom to trailer in front of His Only Son, which reached 1.2 million people in the theaters. So that was the beginning. So these guys have spent 8 years on this project. Our company's been around for 10 years, being prepared for something like this, to the point that we're talking 8 years and then 5 days. We're talking 30 seconds before we ship the DCPs. And then after that, we're doing all the research and saying, when do we launch this film? And we decide that the best time where we don't have too much competition is September 15th in the fall. And
because September 15 is Independence Day in Mexico.
Yes.
So of course I was thinking about Independence Day, freedom. Well, imagine the symbolism. And then
that's right. And Eduardo just lit up when he heard, September 15th. And we decided to do it. We're like, we can do that. We knew what we were doing with His Only Son. We can do it again. We can do it on September 15th. And there was somebody else at our company who had said, I'm just feeling like this should be in July. And we're like, are you crazy? Everybody's saying you cannot launch a movie in July. That's when all the $100 million films are coming out. That's when Indiana Jones comes out, and when Mission Impossible and Oppenheimer. Can't happen. And so we made a decision. And the following morning, I was woken at 4 a.m. And the words came into my mind, Neil, September 15th is too late. July 4th. If you'll step forward, the doors will be opened. So I went back to work and I said to everybody, how would we make this work on July 4th? And they're like, are you nuts? What are you thinking? And I said, I'm not asking you whether it's nuts. I'm just asking, if it were possible, how would we do it? And we debated internally, and we were floundering. But finally, as a team, when everybody came on board and realized that that was the right day and that we should step forward in faith, from the moment that we made that decision, less than 24 hours later, we were in Texas in front of dozens of people from Cinemark screening the film. Just like that. And then when we did present it to them, they said, when are you thinking to release this? And we said, July 4th. And they said, whoa, wait a second. Like, that's a really bad date to launch this film. Then they screened the film, and afterwards they said, we're behind you. And then AMC. And then Regal, who's in bankruptcy, and whose trustee says they can only, with independent films, give it to 45% of their screens. That's the maximum they can do, unless it's a big studio. And Regal, through a miracle, all their screens. And then the reason that I came here long ago, struggling to survive when Disney was trying to destroy us, for their own reasons. They truly felt like what we were doing was wrong. They're launching Indiana Jones the weekend before we're launching Sound of Freedom. And right now, today, Sound of Freedom is out pre-selling Indiana Jones by 25%. And tonight we're going to release a very special trailer on a live stream with Jim Caviezel. Hope you'll all see it.
Neil Jordan texted me. He might try to show it right now.
That'd be awesome. If he could show it to you, you guys could see it before it comes out publicly. This trailer. Is there a tech guy in the house? Anyway, you guys work on it. Whether or not you can watch it here or after is kind of irrelevant, but the story is important because this trailer came from an idea from an engineer inside of our company. This is a programmer who also plays the piano and just had inspiration at home on how this message could be communicated in a trailer. He mocked it up in his own way, got his daughter to try to sing the tune just to get across the concept. And then the creative team took that and worked on it and composed music and brought together a choir and put together images and footage to make this trailer. What Caviezel said and what the movie said, what Alejandro wrote into the script, and I don't know if it was probably script, but when God tells you what to do, you cannot hesitate, is the thread through this entire story. Because after I had the experience I had, that I was being directed when to release this film, we floundered. We were hesitating. But the moment we made a decision, all the doors opened. And this engineer who doesn't make trailers. We had hired 2 trailer houses to make trailers for Sound of Freedom. They're great trailers. The trailers we've released so far are great trailers. They're beautiful trailers. But when you see this trailer, you'll understand. And the reason that I want you to understand that is because there will be something that if you will pray and ask God what you can do in your circle of influence, and you're willing to act on it, just as Tim was, just as Catherine was, Alejandro, Eduardo, and Jim, you're going to be part of the solution. And the smallest thing can have huge impact. And it doesn't matter whether or not it makes sense, or whether the experts say it makes sense, or whether the bureaucracy's in the way, or whether it doesn't align with what you've done before, that you've never made a trailer. As long as you'll step forward in faith, this is how we're going to solve this problem.
Can I intro the trailer real quick? Just really briefly. This film, as you saw, takes place in Cartagena, but the core of the corrupt, the core of the evil that's putting our children at risk is right here in the Promised Land. Yeah. There's a reason the film, we had no idea what the border would look like 8 years from the time the script was written. But you saw the true story began at that port of entry. They filmed that scene with the little boy in the van on the very spot at the Calexico, California West port of entry where that happened. The necklace, true story. My name on the necklace, true story. And now we are recognizing, we didn't know what God knew when he inspired these guys to write the script. This film is not so much about Cartagena, Colombia. It's about the United States of America. We are the #1 consumers of child sex. We are we're the top 3 destination countries for human trafficking. No country on the planet is sexualizing children by policy than the United States of America. This problem is here, and it has to be solved here. And that's why this trailer is unbelievable to me. I watched it for the first time at the Speaker McCarthy's office with him there, because I didn't know they had it. I sat behind him, sobbed. And I thought, oh my gosh, you nailed it. Because this message is about us fixing our country.
The engineer nailed it, right?
All right.
Here.
We are ready to run it. So let's dim the lights and watch the trailer. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking our wonderful guests, Alejandro, Tim, Eduardo, and Neil. Thank you, gentlemen. God bless.
Harmon brothers, but also the Severino brothers. Leo Severino is Eduardo and myself business partner, and he's part of all of our journey, and he could not be here today, but I'm very, very grateful to you, Roger, for putting this together and putting the Severino name up here.
Crazy. I told my brother he was crazy for starting a film company with you guys. I am so glad he listened to God calling him instead of me.
And one last thing, because I feel like we're family here too. I'm about to make a very, very important decision in my life, the most difficult and the most important decision of my life. So please pray for me. I'm asking God every day that if this is coming from Him, to open all the doors. But if it's not coming from Him, to close all the doors. And make it very obvious, because I cannot see neither hear what He can. And that is going to be, that answer has to be very soon, because I have September as the deadline. And it's based on many people asking me to do this. I love Mexico. My country has been raped for decades. For decades. Mexico is a very rich country where a lot of poor people are living. And we're just tired of seeing how this socialist government is destroying our country. And I'm not a politician, I'm a filmmaker, I'm an actor, but I love my country. And we are not just neighbors, we are brothers. And I really believe that we can work together to make America and Mexico great together. So please pray for me about this decision of running for president of Mexico. God bless you.
Thank you all. Please join us in the reception afterwards.